Computer science. We're going to talk about the ArrayList object. The ArrayList is an object that you can use to store many values in one variable, a list of values, if you will. Like any other object, the ArrayList object has behavior, it has methods that you can call to manipulate the list. So what are the kind of things you can do with a list? You can create a list. You can add things to your list. You can insert things into the middle of your list. You can set the value of elements in your list. You can change the value of things that are in your list. You can get things from your list and look at them, do things with them. You can remove elements from your list completely. And you can get the size of your list. You have a list, how many things are in it? You can ask that question. The computer will give you the answer. These are all the things you can do with a list, and you'll use methods, and we'll talk about all these. And here you go. This is the syntax. This is your crib sheet for ArrayList. So how do you create an ArrayList? You say new ArrayList. And then there's this weirdo new syntax here with angle brackets. So new ArrayList of some type, and then some parentheses. Whenever you use new, right, you have this parentheses there. How do you add elements? There's a method called add. Add, and then whatever you want to add goes in the parentheses as your argument. How do you insert elements? You also use the add method, but this time you give it two arguments, an index, where do you want to add it, and a value, what do you want to add? Setting the value, it's a method called set. I want to set the value at this particular index, and I want to set it to this particular value. Getting an element, .get, you got a list. I want to get the value that's stored at this particular index. Removing an element is the same idea. It's called .remove, and you tell it what index you want to remove. And this, what's the size? How many elements are in my list? You use .size. So if you remember the things you can do, you can add things, you can remove things, you can set things. Then remembering the method names is fairly straightforward, right? They're how do you add something? The add method. How do you remove something? The remove method. And you'll want to remember these method names because knowing what tools you have, knowing what you're able to do will help lead you in the direction of how to solve problems. If you don't remember that it's possible to insert an element into a list, then a problem that's solved by inserting elements into a list, you won't be able to solve because you won't remember that that's a tool you have in your toolbox. So you do want to kind of memorize what abilities you have with a list. There's not many, and I think they're pretty obvious if you think about it, but you want to be able to know these. If I say, you've got a list, what can you do? You should be able to rattle off all the things you can do. We'll talk about these a little bit in depth, each one of these. So creating an array list, here's an example. It's just create a variable, array list, angle bracket of type with a name equals new array list of type, parentheses. So the new part is this angle brackets of type thing. And so what that is that's telling you what kind of thing is in your list. So when you have a list, that list is going to be a list of the same kinds of things. If you have a grocery list, it'll be a list of foods. If you have a list of athletes, it's going to be a bunch of athletes in this list. If you have a list of names, it's going to be a list of strings of names. They're all the same kind of thing on a list. You wouldn't it wouldn't make sense in a program, at least, to have a list of things that just random stuff that has no relation to each other. So when you create an array list, you have to actually specify what kind of things are going in this list. And that's what goes in those angle brackets. It'll be some sort of type. So here's some examples. An array list of integers, I called it nums, equals new array list integer. Array list of doubles, I called it prices, is equal to new array list double. Array list of strings, called words, is equal to new array list of string. So what's going in these angle brackets is a type. And notice it's on both sides. When you declare the variable, you have the angle brackets. And when you create the new instance of the object, you have the brackets. And the value inside those brackets will be the same on the left and the right side of that equal sign. Notice that I used capital I integer instead of int, and capital D double instead of lowercase double. That's because we have to use wrapper classes. The things that go inside these angle brackets are, wrapper classes. The things that go inside the angle brackets have to be objects. They can't be primitive types. So you can't say an array list of int. You have to say array list of integer. And there's a lot of other things that kind of leads to, but Java's fixed a lot of that to make it easier for you. So all you have to do is remember in the angle brackets, use the capital I integer, and basically anything else in your code, you can put numbers in there. It's going to work the way you want it to work. You just have to remember that in the angle brackets, capital D double and capital I integer if you want numbers or doubles, interdoubles. So that's creating a array list. Once you have an array list, and when you create it, you give it a name. This example, it's called nums. You've got some variable that is a list, and you can call methods on that variable to do things. So here I'm creating an array list called letters. It's an array list of strings, which means I can add strings to it. The type of the array list tells me what kind of things I can add. And so I use the add method, and in the argument, I just pass it a string. So I'm adding the string A to this list of letters. And I can add something else, and I can say letters.add B, and now I've added B to the list of letters. And here in the blue box, I'm showing you the contents of the list. So when you first create the list, it's empty. It has nothing in it. Lists start empty. Then I add an A, and now my list has an A in it. So in the square brackets, I show you the list of things. There's an A in it. And then I add B, and now there's an A and a B. So when you call the add method, it adds the thing you're adding to the end of the list. So every time I call add, we just tack it on to the end of the list. Okay. Another thing you can do is you can insert elements, and you use the add method to do that. So here I've got my letters array. I add 4 letters, A, B, C, D. So I end up with this list, A, B, C, D. Each letter gets added to the end. If I say letters.add 2, x, so I'm passing it that 2 arguments. The first one's a number, an index, and the next one is the thing I want to insert. It's going to insert that string x at index 2. So when it's done, the value at index 2 will be x. So the first thing that happens is we're going to look at, what are the indexes of A, B, C, D. We find index 2, that's where the C is. We're going to take that C and just push it this way to make some room. So we make a little gap there at index 2. And then we insert the x into that gap. And so we end up with A, B, X, C, D, because we inserted x at index 2. C and D are still there. They just got pushed over, and now their indexes 3 and 4 because we put the x at index 2. We inserted it. We added it at a particular index, right? There is no insert method. We're using the add method to do that, but with 2 arguments. A similar but different method is the set method. So here I've got my list with A, B, C, D in it, and now I'm calling letters.set 2, x. So at index 2, I'm changing the value at index 2 to x. Okay, so we're not making room and moving things. We're just taking whatever's at index 2, we're getting rid of it, and we're replacing it with whatever it says here, in this case, x. So you can see here, this was A, B, C, D. After calling set, it becomes A, B, X, D. The C got replaced by D. We set that index, the value at that index, to the value x. Okay. What's actually neat about the set method is it returns the value that was replaced. So you can assign this method call set to a variable, and what will be stored in that variable is the original value from index 2. So in the list, index 2 becomes x, but this variable old that I created, it gets the value c, because c was the value that got replaced. So set changes the value, the state of the list. It changes the values in the list, but it gives you back the thing that got removed. So that's interesting to know when you're setting values. You can get back the thing that you're replacing, because you might care about that. You might want to use that for something in your code. But you can just call set and not store it in a variable. That's totally fine. But if you want that value that is being replaced, you can assign it to a variable to get that value. There's the get method. So the get method, of course, will return a value because you're getting the value at the particular index, in this case 2. And whenever you call a method that returns something like get, you assign the value to a variable. And I called the variable value here. So the list stays A, B, C, D. Get doesn't change anything, but the value at index 2 is C. That's what gets stored in the variable value, because that's getting the value index 2, store it in that variable. And get doesn't manipulate the list at all. It's just giving you back information about the list. The remove method manipulates the list. The remove method, and here I pass index 2. So the value at index 2 goes away. We just get rid of it. And then everything slides in to fill that gap. So you take it, you rip it right out. That D moves from index 3 to index 2. So it doesn't like leave a hole. You pull something out and everything. Sorry about that. And everything gets collapsed in. So we go from ABCD to ABD because we removed the C. And another neat thing about remove is it will return the value that was removed. So if you want to, you can call remove and assign it to a variable. And what will get stored in that variable is the value that was removed, the value that used to be index 2. So if we remove C at index 2, the list becomes ABD, and this variable old has the value C because that's the value that got removed. And just like set, you can just call remove if all you care about is removing the value from the list. But if you want to do something with that value that you removed, you could store it in a variable if you want, and then use that variable later in your code. And then finally, we get to the size method. So this is another method that does not change the list. It just gives you information about the list. So we got our list, ABCD. We call size. It tells us that there's 4 elements in this list. If I add some more stuff and call size again, it will tell me the new size. It just counts everything and tells you that number, whatever's in there. Pretty straightforward. So this is our summary of, this is the API. This is everything you can do with an array list. Here's how you create one up there. Array list, angle bracket E, letters equals new array list, angle bracket E. That E can be any type that you want to put in. So it could be a string, it could be an integer, whatever type of thing you're storing in that list. And these are all your methods and what they return. And again, the E's are like variables for a type. You would never write E, E would be a particular type. So you got your 2 adds. The first one adds to the end. The next one inserts at the particular index. Set changes the value at the index. Get gives you back the value. It gets the value at that index. Remove removes the value at the index. And size tells you the size of the array, how many elements are in the array. Something to say about the indexes, and this is across the board whenever we talk about indexes, the first element in the list will be index 0, just like the first character in a string is index 0. We always start counting from 0 or indexing from 0 in computer science. What do we got here? Next. So, array list and methods. So when you're writing a method, there's kind of 2 places where you can have types. You can have variables as your parameter variables can be a list. You can say this method takes a list as a parameter, and you can also have the return type. We'll talk about the parameter first. So the angle brackets are part of the type of the variable. When you make an array list string, that's the type. It's an array list of string, which is a different type than array list integer, which is a different type than array list student. Whatever you put in those angle brackets is part of the type. So if I'm taking a list as a parameter, I have to say it's a list and it's a list of what. So the angle brackets go in the type in your parameter list. Similarly, if my method returns a list, I put the type in the method header. That type has to include the angle brackets. If it wants to return a list of what? You have to tell me it's going to return a list of what. But when you actually return the value, remember, you don't return types. With the return statement, you return values, you return variables. The variable does not have the angle brackets. The angle brackets are part of the type. So here in this method, we're creating an array list. It's called answer. Maybe we do some more stuff in here. We add stuff to the list. We manipulate it somehow, whatever. And in the end, we want to return that list we created. We just say return answer. There's no angle brackets. It's not answer angle bracket string. It's not array list angle bracket string. It's the variable name. So the type goes in the return type of the method header. And when you return something, you're returning the value. You're returning a variable. And that's it. That's array lists. There's how to create it, all the methods you can call, and then how you use the array list syntax with a method as a return type, a return value, and as a parameter. And then now we could use array lists to solve all sorts of problems, including using this tool we're going to learn in the next video, which you will be watching soon. So enjoy that.